And I had just bought the property like a week and a half ago, and I'm like, of course this is happening on my first deal. Like, what did I just buy?
Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen, and today we've got our guest, Gage Heward. Now, Gage was a millionaire by 22. He owns 23 doors of real estate. He hosts the Proximity is Power podcast. He's invested over $100,000 in personal development. He's read over 650 books since high school, which was not very long ago, only 2017. And he's the owner of Mamba Marketing. So Gage, welcome to the show. That's quite the bio, especially for someone so young. That's awesome to hear.
Thanks, Joe. I'm pumped to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. So how old are you right now?
I'm 26.
26. Awesome. So you've been doing some stuff, man. Fill us in, like, how does a 26-year-old have 23 doors already and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on self-development, and why would you spend it on that when you could go blow it on a nice car looking cool or more real estate? So I mean, there's a lot to cover right there, but maybe just tell us a little bit about you first.
Yeah, man. It's a long story, but we'll try and make it quick. So I'm from Utah, born and raised, and I grew up in a home where my dad had money, but we were given nothing growing up.
Cool.
Like we had to earn everything extra we ever got. And so it taught us to, like, if we wanted something, we had to make a plan to get it. And my dad actually got us selling discount cards door to door when we were like 8-10 years old. And basically we'd sell it for $40, and anything we sold it for more than $20, we got to keep. So every time we sold one, we get like $20. And
these are like coupon cards for people to get discounts places.
Yeah,
Nice.
Exactly. And so we'd go to like out in our ward and try to sell these things door to door. And so I learned work ethic. I learned discipline at a really young age. I had to get my Eagle Scout before I was 14. Yeah, like my parents had very high standards. Like we had to get A's. If we got like below A's, we had to pay my parents. Like,
awesome.
Like they paid us for A's, but if we got anything below an A, yeah. And so I feel like what kind of turned the corner for me is like I had a really good foundation of work ethic, discipline, and I felt like I had this drive because even though my dad had been successful, I didn't get to see any of it. Like we always had to pay for our own clothes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I had this friend in high school who was like super wealthy, and I got to see his family's lifestyle, and he was a successful my friend's dad was a successful businessman, and they had the craziest lifestyle, like courtside tickets to the Jazz, Riverside Country Club, like Deer Valley Scout cabins, trips, another house in Boston with a G-Wagon, cars, craziest house. So I saw this lifestyle, and they were like the coolest people in the world, like the most charitable, the most giving.
Isn't it funny? I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's like in the media, like in the movies and everything, it's like the rich people are always like evil, like douchebags, selfish, just like unrelatable. They're always like the criminal, the bad guy. They're always just like, oh my gosh, they're rich. And it's like, in my experience, and it sounds like in yours, it's like it's some of the best, most amazing, well-rounded, like good humans you've ever met that just really have their priorities straight that you've ever met. And it just doesn't get that. I think that reputation is just a lot of an excuse for people to be like, oh, well, I don't want to be rich because they're all bad. And then they don't actually have to do what it takes to get wealthy. But anyway, it just made me think of that when you were describing how awesome this family was.
No, I agree. I think, yeah, entertainment movies make rich people seem like absolute douchebags. But
yeah,
I think money is just a maximizer. Like it makes you more of what you are. And I like to believe that most people in the world are good. So most rich people are probably good too, And so getting that taste and getting in that proximity with a family, I just it woke something up inside of me in high school of like, I want to go make a ton of money so I can go give at the level and like make an impact like they're making. not only in the school, but the community, like all of the businesses, like the charities that they were doing were just really cool. And then like a couple months before I graduated, my dad took me to lunch and he's like, "What are your plans after high school?" And I didn't know. And he's like, "Gage, I've like all the success I attribute to two things." He's like, "Number one are the books I've read, and number two are the people I've met." He's like, "Proximity is power. Like who you spend time with, you become like." And he's like, "Remember that stack of books I gave you for Christmas last year?" And I hadn't touched any of them, you know? And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Those books, like they were all self-help, you know, Think and Grow Rich, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Richest Man in Babylon, all of the OG books. They're all, a lot of them are right here, but he basically said, "I'll pay you $10 per book you read, and you should try to like take someone you look up to lunch as often as you can." So $10 wasn't a lot, but to me, like in my dad being cheap, that was like a ton to me. And I just could see it in his face that he actually believed that like what made him successful were these things. And so, yeah, dude, that got me on a path of like starting to read books. And like the more I read, the more I learned. And then the the more I read, I looked at the world in a different lens, and I looked at life in a different lens. And it kind of like got me excited of like, hey, I could actually go hit this goal of like becoming wealthy so I can, you know, go make an impact on the world.
What were some of those things that like stood out to you that were like, whoa, like, because you've been around success, you knew it was possible, you know, but
Yeah.
once you started reading the books, it kind of shifted for what was possible for you personally. What were some of the like
Yeah.
aha moments?
One thing my dad always told me to read is like autobiographies of super successful people,
Okay.
like Shoe Dog, Made in America, the Walmart story, like some of these books. And um, what I kind of started to notice is that, and Rich Dad Poor Dad, the cash flow quadrants, like all these books kind of have like a theme of like, if you want to own a business, you need to learn how to sell. Like sales is the number one skill that you need in life. And so that was like really interesting to me. So and what's funny is like around the same time, my cousin approached me about a door-to-door sales job, to sell pest control for a summer, commission only gig. And he had sold the last summer and made $44,000. And he's like, "Hey, I made a list of guys that I think would do well. I think you'd sell well. Like, you're decent at working hard and being positive. I think you'd crush it." And at first, I literally like told him no. Like, I don't want to sell door to door. That sounds like the worst thing ever, you know?
Right.
Like, I'm like, I sold door to door in the ward growing up and I hated it. And so at first I told him no, but then that night I went home and talked to my dad. And I'm like, "Hey, my like JT hit me up to do sales. What do you think about that?" And he's like, "Well, what'd you say?" And I'm like, "I told him no." And he's like, "Well, there's two reasons why you absolutely should go do that job." He's like, "And I don't even know this. I don't know if you know this, but me and your mom actually sold for 3 summers back when we were in college."
Mm.
And he had sold pest control for Todd Peterson before Vivint was Vivint.
No
And he's
way.
like, yeah, and he's like, "My best summer back then, I made 60 grand. We were able to buy a triplex, graduate debt free, and buy our first house from the money we had made." And it was like pivotal. But he's like, he's like, "I went to 4 years of school at BYU. I learned more in those summers than I did an entire business degree at BYU. Like, I would not be as successful in business as I am today if I hadn't had that background." But he's like, "The two reasons you should go is number one is the money." He's like, "Now that you're graduating high school, the first step you need to take is go from an hourly job to some type of commission or results-based job. Because in an hourly job, you're capped on how much you can make by how many hours you work. And there's only a certain amount of hours anyone can work in a week."
Right.
He's like, "What's cool about sales is you don't get paid per hour, you get paid what you put in the hour. And so like there's no limit to how much you can make." And he's like, my dad's in finance. He's like, if you can make a ton of money while you're in your late teens, early 20s and invest that, you'll be able to retire faster than all your friends. And the second reason was the sales skills.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't care if you want to do sales as a profession. I don't care if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, a business owner. Sales will make you better in any field you go into. If you want to be a husband, you'll be a better husband. If you want to be a father someday, you'll be a better father. So my dad sold me on going out and knocking doors. So that's what happened after I graduated high school.
That's cool. And I want to point out something. People think like, oh, some people listening, a lot of people in this world, in our realm have done sales and they understand like the power of it. But those who have never done it, they might be like, why would his dad say like the most important skill is learning to sell? Like, who cares, But it's funny because I feel like there's levels of sales. And it's like, if you get in, sometimes that like base level is kind of maybe almost a little ugly. Like there's the guys who kind of lie and manipulate and it's like they can kind of like weasel their way into getting some sales. And that's not what he's saying is important to learn. That's the base level, like kind of the ugly side of sales. But once you actually get good and you know what you're doing, you find a problem and you find a solution that is a win-win, that the customer needs something, you figure out the best way to fix that problem, and you find the best way to deliver that from what you can provide. And that's where value is in all business, right? Is providing, solutions to problems. The bigger the problem, the bigger the solution and the bigger the payday. And that's really what like the higher level sales does, is really understanding someone, seeing truly where they're at, meeting them as a person and delivering what they need to make their life better. And when people can hit that higher level, like that's what your dad's talking about, where it's like you need to go learn sales, plus all the work ethic and just interpersonal skills, being able to communicate, like all of that plays in. So anyway, I've just
No,
seen
for
the ugly side of sales and the awesome side. And it's so cool when people can get those, clear. And I think some of the very, very best guys I know, they're so clear on that. And they're the most honest. Like to be the top tier, you just got to be like either really sketchy or really, really honest. And those who are honest will probably have a little higher lifespan, but there's still some sketchy ones out there too. So you got to be smart.
Oh, for sure. I think like we were saying about how the media portrays the rich. I think like society views salespeople as slimy, shady, like the
Yeah.
used car salesman will say anything to get the deal. But
Mm-hmm.
like Tony Robbins says, like sales is service. And like I feel like so many people view sales in a bad light because most salespeople, just like anything, are amateur and like
Right.
very novice. And the thing about sales is you get paid per deal. And so if you're novice and you're not really good and you're not like committed to putting in the work to learning and mastering the skill, you're gonna do whatever to
You're going to
get.
cut corners.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing in
exactly.
all of life. Like you said, you're like,
Yeah.
most people are good. So most rich people are good. If most people are good, then most salespeople are going to be good. But there's
Amen.
also trashy people who are poor, trashy people who are rich, trashy people who do sales. Like there's going to be some of all of that.
And
Um,
I'll say too, like my first summer, dude, I got more doors slammed in my face, more people calling the cops, more people yelling at me than all of the other years combined. And it's because I was a novice. I like my cousin would tell me, go knock the door and don't leave the porch until they tell you no 3 times. And
mhm.
sometimes like someone would come out and immediately be like, no, I'm not interested. I'm like, okay, that's one.
Yeah.
And so I was terrible at reading people, didn't know how to communicate. And like by the third time, they're like, are you like deaf? Like I told you no. I'm like, okay, that's the third one. And I'm like, why am I about to cry? you know?
Yeah.
And so like as I've gotten better, I've been able to like, yeah, like my skills have gotten better. I'm way better at reading people. And it just really helps me I only try to sell people that are interested, that could truly benefit from the product. And it's so much more fun and enjoyable to sell when you're actually good at it.
Yeah. I love that, man. No, that's super poignant, like you said. And in the beginning, you don't know, and so you have to like figure out how to read people, and there's so much benefit that comes from that. Anyway, we could talk about sales forever, and it's interesting though, and it's a really good foundation because that's kind of what's given you the ability to invest the way you have in real estate. Because you're like 23 doors. I'd love to hear about what kind of strategy you've used because you're not a full-time real estate investor. You're building your sales
Right.
groups and you're managing teams and guys and selling yourself, and it's a lot of work and effort. So what has been your strategy with real estate? How have you scaled to what you have done? And then I want to get into the story of your very very first deal.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And I really go back to like the principle of proximity is power, because if I wasn't at the company I was at, like, lucky for me, I was at a company where there was this guy named Chandler Smith, and
Mm.
Brody's friends with him. But Chandler Smith was at the same company I was at, and he was making like $1 million in his summer from, you know, selling, training, and recruiting teams, and then using all of his active earned income and funneling all of it into real estate investing. And he started a YouTube channel, and then eventually started a course that I ended up purchasing. And so I didn't know much about real estate, but I started like listening to Bigger Pockets and just like interview Chandler, watch YouTube videos. I started like get in proximity with people that had done it, because so many people get caught up in the how to do stuff. And I did too, but I'm like, if I could just go learn from someone that's done it, I could figure out the blueprint of how to go do it. So I learned mostly, I'd say, from Chandler Smith, and his approach was try to find deals that had good cash on cash return. So he runs his numbers very conservatively, and he tries to make sure that he finds a 10% cash on cash return. Otherwise, he doesn't buy the deal. And in today's market, that's really hard to do. Like,
Yeah,
you
it's a
have to.
little easier when he was scaling, but
Oh, for sure. The 2010s to the 2021-ish era was wild, right?
good
So
decade there.
so yeah, that was like my original thing, is like buy and hold long term. Um, maybe add a little bit of value, but mostly just like buy as is. Yeah. So
That's cool. So where have you bought most of your properties at?
yeah, mostly Utah. I live in Utah. I know the market pretty well. So yeah, mostly Utah, and then I have a couple out of state, like Florida, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and North Carolina.
That's
So
cool.
I've tried to just buy in markets where people are moving to, not out of, and preferably like most of them are blue, red states. I'll just
Yeah,
put
yeah.
that out there, you know.
So how are you finding these out of state deals? Like, are you doing like, you have any programs you work with, or people like that are managing and are running it to make it more
Yeah.
passive and turnkey for you?
Yeah, so right now, so one of my mentors was told me like I shouldn't hire a property manager until I have 10 doors.
Okay.
So up until after 10 doors, like I was managing everything myself, and I'm really glad that I did, because I learned all the skills of managing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because like you don't even, if you just buy a property and immediately have a manager, you don't even know if they're doing a good job or not. Like,
Right. You don't even know what it entails. It's
you don't
like,
even know what's
okay.
happening. Yeah. So, yeah, so right now with all my units, like they all are managed, and I'm pretty passive. I mean, I'm still managing the manager, but yeah, so I guess how I got into out of state is I had another friend who worked at the same company I was at, and he was buying properties in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so his wife was an agent. He had 150 units himself.
Was he
And
living out there, or did he just
yeah,
have a connection?
he was living out there.
Cool.
So that was his home base. And so he just was showing me the rent to value ratios and all of that stuff. And it was pretty cool. And he had his management company and everything. So I just started buying a couple out there. So that's how I got into the out of state world. And then once I got comfortable with that, I had some other friends who had some properties in Oklahoma City and then some in Florida. And so I just started buying with the people that I
And these
knew.
people had like trusted property managers that you could just kind of tap in and duplicate
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, plug
I
into.
love that. I always tell people ask me because I do the same thing virtually, a lot of out of state investing, and people are like, "Well, how do you pick a market? Like, how do I choose what's out there?" And it's like
Right.
I always tell them where you have connection is more important than finding the perfect market with the perfect numbers. Like, if you have zero connection, then yeah, like you might as well dial in the perfect market with the best price to rent ratios and the best appreciation and the best whatever,
Hmm.
landlord laws and all that. But for most people, it's like, well, go where you have a connection. Go where you have some sort of on the ground leverage, where there's a proven track record like you did. And it's like that makes it way easier than trying to have zero connection, zero knowledge of the so-called perfect market, which doesn't exist because they all have their pros and cons.
No,
And I
for
like
sure.
you just went where people were doing it that you knew.
Yeah, no, it's huge because I feel like just trust is really important, especially at the
Mhm.
beginning. And if you trust someone, like that really helps take the risk off a little bit, not all the way, but a little bit. And so, no, I'm like no, proximity is power, right? Like if you have proximity with people that have properties in other states, like it's way easier to pull the trigger and feel confident on the market, on your numbers before you send it. So,
Well, and there's such a lot like a feeling of abundance with real estate for some reason. Like I feel like everybody's just like wanting to help each other. You know what I mean? And it's like you have an
sure.
investor in like your buddy in, North Carolina or Oklahoma. It's like they're not gonna buy all the houses. You know what I mean? So you coming in and buying one or two or three, like they don't care. It's like law of abundance. Like the more the merrier. They're not gonna be like, oh, well, if you buy one, then I don't get one. You know what I mean? It's just not like that.
Right. Yeah, and like the more the demand, the higher the prices go anyway, right? So supply demand.
Yeah, exactly. And then if they're doing property management, then they're like stoked that you're buying a couple because now, they make a few bucks off that. So it's just like very
Exactly.
mutually beneficial to everyone involved. Which is one of the cool things I've found with real estate is if it's done right, just like we were saying with sales, like if it's done right, it's just a win-win-win.
For
Like, it's
sure.
only when things are done wrong that there's, like, a loser. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You mentioned the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and that's one of his main principles is win-win, like, think win-win. And it's like, if someone has to lose, like, that's fun in sports, like, that's awesome in a basketball game, like, we like winners, we like losers, it's exciting. But in business and in life, like, there shouldn't be losers. That means you're doing something wrong.
for sure. I agree.
Dude, that's awesome. So let's go to your very first deal though. So you get in, your dad. I love how you mentioned, he was successful. You grew up around successful people. You're exposed to that world, but you never really got to enjoy it. They made you work for everything, which is such a perfect balance because the person who's given everything, obviously, they never developed that like backbone and skill to be successful. But also the person, this goes into your whole concept of proximity is power, the person who's never been exposed to it and doesn't know anybody who's ever been successful, that's hard for them to like comprehend it.
Yeah,
And when you've seen it, even if you weren't the one doing it, but you've seen it, it's there. That's the goal. It's possible. You're around it. The proximity is so much power. And then, so you're exposed to it. Your dad teaches you all these skills. You start reading, studying, you go out, you start selling, making money, being successful, learning to work with people. Um, when does real estate come in? Obviously you talked about how David Chandler Smith was killing it and you
yeah,
started studying that. But what was the first deal like? When did you actually pull the trigger and what did that look like?
yeah. Great question. Because yeah, I mean, once I started making some money in sales, like there's so many different things you can invest in,
Right.
right? Like cryptocurrency, there's stocks, there's real estate.
Oh my gosh, crypto, dude. I just gotta share this. I've never
Yeah.
been in the crypto thing. I've had buddies throughout the years tell me to get into it. My buddy's like, get back into it. I'm like, okay. I find my Coinbase login, I get back in. I had bought $500 worth of Bitcoin in 2016 when it was $300. It'd
What?
be worth like multiple six figures right now. but I sold it all like right after I bought it because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, look, I
That's
just found this out yesterday. It's like if I had just not sold that, it'd be worth like over 100K right now.
yeah,
Um,
Bitcoin's gone crazy for
so
sure.
whoopsie. Anyway, I'm sure we all
Yeah,
have stories like that with real estate too. Anybody ever? Oh, we should have bought back in the day, you know?
or
But
shouldn't have sold. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, no, there's so many things to invest in, and my friend Casey Boss says like there's no such thing as a good investment, only good investors. And like if you don't know what to invest in yourself, invest in your human life value, invest in yourself until you know what to invest in and what not to invest in. And
Mm,
so the more I did research, the more I realized like 99% of millionaires in the United States became millionaires through real estate, whether that was their own personal residence or rental properties or investments in real estate. And so like the more I studied real estate, the more I liked it. Like with the cash flow, the principal pay down, the tax benefits, like all of the things that and depreciation, like all the things just made so much sense.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what happened was the thing about being self-employed and having 1099 income, you need 2 years of tax returns to qualify for property. So I actually ended up selling for 3 summers before I could qualify on a property. But yeah, so my first deal,
Sure. I just want to interrupt real quick just
yeah,
for the listeners. So to get a traditional, conventional loan, that's true, the whole 2
yeah,
year thing. But just for listeners listening, just so people don't feel limited, there's other ways to get loans. There's DSCR loans, you can get commercial loans, investment loans, and you bank statement loans. Like there's a dozen kinds of ways to finance this. For any of
amen.
the first year sales reps or anybody who's not in sales, but whatever, like there's ways to do it right away. You don't have to wait 3 years till you're in there like Gage did. Obviously, it
Yeah,
worked out
great.
for you, but I just want people to not be thinking like, oh, I have to wait. Like there's so many ways to do it.
Yeah,
But most people don't realize that. And they are told by a traditional lender, hey, you need 2 years. And so they just sit back and wait. Which as you've seen in real estate and any other investment, like waiting is expensive
yeah.
because things go up in value. So anyway, but go on. Not saying you did anything wrong, just pointing out
No,
for the
that's a
listeners
great point.
to
And
be able
and
to
honestly,
be
that's
creative.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome that this podcast is out there so people don't, can learn from my mistakes. Because, yeah, I wish I would have bought in sooner. And, yeah, like not only are there other traditional financing ways, but there's creative finance. You could do
Yeah.
seller finance. Like there's so many options
Mm-hmm.
that I just didn't even know about. Right. And so, but yeah, so my first deal, literally, I was just scouring you know, the marketplace, UtahRealEstate.com or Zillow or whatever. And this duplex popped up in Provo, right next to college. And my professor told me that like buying next to college towns was good because you could rent by the room and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I saw this duplex, and what caught my eye is the price was lower than most of the duplexes I'd seen, and it was already rented, and rents were higher than what my payment would be.
You're like,
We call that
great, let's go.
phantom cash flow, right? And so here's when I was running the numbers, I hadn't even like taken Chandler's course. I barely just got like started in learning about real estate. But when I was doing the numbers, I remember the purchase price was like 325K, and I would have to put like 70 to 80K down, and my payment was going to be $1,500 a month, and it was rented for $2,300 a month. And I'm like, I have $800 to spare every month, like for expenses, and I'll make the tenants pay utilities because they already were. I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't. I think this could be a good deal. Like I
Yeah.
really didn't know how to analyze the numbers. And the thing is, with that property, it was literally a couple blocks south of BYU, and it was built in 1911. So it was like an
Oh,
old eyesore, right?
yeah.
And funny story. So I'm working with this realtor who that's a cool thing too. I was working with a realtor who had investment properties herself, so that was helpful, but she still didn't know exactly like how to like what to run the numbers for vacancy or for capex expenditures, maintenance, like all the things that go
Yeah.
into it. But anyway, I ended up pulling the trigger, and the first month of owning the property, I text both tenants. I'm like, "Hey, I'm a new owner. Like, send me rent through Venmo. Here's my Venmo." And one side pays me like the same day that rent's due, but the other side just ghosts me.
Mm.
And I call them, no answer, and then I end up driving to the property and knock on the door. And what I realized when I'm like pulling up to this house, there was just so much junk in the
Mm.
driveway. I'm like, this isn't looking good. So I go knock on the door, no one answers. I punch in the keypad code, and literally they had moved in the middle of their lease and left the unit completely in shambles. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the electricity had been turned off, and there was like rotting food in the fridge, diapers everywhere, stained carpet. They had cat hair, smelled like urine. Like, it was terrible. And I had just bought the property, like closed on it a week and a half ago, and I'm like, of course this is happening
You're
on my
like,
first deal. Like, what did I just buy? And I had invested more money than I ever had in my life into this thing. And so I was like, holy crap. And so I called my friend who had some properties, and I'm like, dude, what? I just walked into this. Like, what do I do? And so he just basically said, yeah, clean everything out and then hire some people to repaint and redo the floors and re-rent it. And so hired some company to come clean out all their crappy furniture, clean the place, hired painters, and got some new flooring in there, and then rented it. And it's funny because I didn't know that there was a way to screen tenants back then. Like, my
yeah.
smart move, right? Or like, I didn't verify income. I did no background credit checks. But anyway, look, I lucked out because they were a good tenant. Sometimes they had their church pay rent because they were behind, but once I got it rented, it started cash flowing pretty consistently. So that was
Nice.
my first deal.
So it sounds like the numbers actually did work, even though you didn't know how to run them. Your gut was
Yeah,
like, there's enough of a spread here. Like, what I
I
don't know is going to be okay somehow,
yeah,
which is awesome. Because a lot of times, like you said, the phantom cash flow, people go, hey, my mortgage is 1,500 and it rents for 1,600. I'm good to go, right?
yeah,
And that $100 or $200 with that kind of math doesn't work, because you've got expenses and like say capex, the big ticket items. You're just gonna have so many things.
for sure. And
Um,
especially like the older the property is, the more maintenance problems are going to happen, right? And so
mhm.
that's what I learned the hard way because, like, yes, since it was built in 1911, it had electrical stuff that we had to fix that was expensive, plumbing issues. And so, like Chandler says, to try to buy things that are like newer than 1970 just to avoid some of those like major things. But you can
Yeah.
still buy a great property that's older than that, but just know what you're getting into,
You just got to run your numbers tighter. On my asset
Yeah.
analyzer, when I run my numbers, I used to just do like a 10% for maintenance reserves, right? I
Yeah.
have 10% for cash capex for like the big ticket, and then another
Right.
10% for just maintenance stuff.
Yeah.
But now what I've shifted that. If it's newer, I'll maybe do a 5%, but then if it gets older, I might do 15 or 20%. Like if it's
Yeah.
if it's 100 years old, like you need to have a high reserve, like hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month set
Yeah.
aside because stuff's gonna happen. Like it just is going to. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
remember.
but if you run the numbers that way, and there's going to be huge vacancies, and there's going to be high repairs, and that's the thing, and you've ran your numbers that way, and it still cash flows with the return you want, it's like, okay, it'll be a bit of a headache, but it can be worth it. But if you run it on a 5% or no reserves and think it's like a new home, you're going to get destroyed.
Yeah, you're in for it for sure. Yeah, like the property, I tried, like it was carpeted, and I tried to put like LVP flooring to make sure there were no stains, and it's just better.
Sure.
but like the freaking cement or whatever, the foundation was cracked, and it was like a gap like that much, like a couple inches in the middle of the living room.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
you can't do that. Like, you have to carpet it, and we'll try and like put something down to make it seem more flat. And then there was like a tree, like the house was right here. There was like a big thick tree that had been cut down where the roots were had been growing underneath the house.
Digging into the
So
home.
it had so many problems. I ended up selling it actually like 2 or 3 years after I bought it, and luckily the markets had gone up like crazy and bought it. I mean, sold it for a little bit more than I bought it for. So
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's one thing that's nice about real estate, especially over the the previous decade or so, is pretty forgiving. You can make a lot of mistakes. I don't know if it's as forgiving right now as it
or
was
will
then.
yeah,
We'll see what happens over the next 3 years, but back then it definitely was more forgiving. But also there's a lot more information out there now. I think it's easier to be on top of it and to make sure that you do cover your bases, make sure that you have the margins you need and everything like that. So
amen.
that didn't scare you off though, and it's cool. It looks like it worked out. You ended up buying it. You learned a little bit of some of the headaches that come with, tenants not responding and trashing the place and stuff like that. What do you do to screen tenants now, or do you even? I mean, I guess you have property management for everything now, but what
Yeah,
advice do you give to a newbie who's like, "Wait, I don't screen my tenants. What should I be doing?"
yes, screen your tenants. It's so easy to do, and it will save yourself so much time and headache later in the future.
So how do you do it? What does that mean?
Yeah. So what I personally do is I literally have like Zillow's rent application I send them, which just basically basic info, like their job information, like basic assets, liability stuff, if they have pets, why they're moving from the previous place. I think yeah, it's Zillow's. You can get it for free online. So I do that, and then if that looks good, if like everything checks out, like meaning I try to look for I make sure that their income's 3 times more than whatever rent is. I
Nice.
make sure that's like the big thing I look for. And then yeah, probably that, and like job history, like how long have they been working with the company. Sometimes I verify like their income if I don't think it's actually accurate or whatever. So I do that, and then if that looks good, then I'll have them. MySmartMove.com is what I've
Mhm.
used. Graham Stephan, shout out on his channel. He talked about that, and I've used it ever since. But basically, My Smart Move, you can send them a background credit check where they pay for it, and it's like $43. You can say I pay for it or the tenant, and then you get their email and you send it to them. They pay for it, and then it runs an automatic background credit check, and then we'll send you back. And then it even gives you like a tenant score, and the higher the score is, the better the tenant. And they'll even tell you if they recommend approving the tenant or denying the tenant based on that. And they even tell you if their income is actually accurate with the data they have in their system. So pretty
Yeah, and
cool.
that one's free. You don't need like I have like a software called Rent Ready that can do a lot of that stuff, and it's pretty
Yeah.
cheap, like $150 for not even that much for the whole year.
Oh,
But like for like say for people listening right now, like My Smart Move, that I use that forever. Like it's a
yeah.
free, easy resource. I reference most of my students to go use that. Great plug there because yeah, you can do a full background check, income check, credit check, all of that, and it looks really professional too. You know what I mean? Like they're like, oh, this is like legit, and so like you're just gonna kind of weed out a lot of people that might not be a good fit. So
Yeah. Cause like the first couple properties that I bought where I wasn't using that and didn't have like a system to screen tenants, there were issues for sure. Like way more people were late. Um, Smoking was a problem where it was clearly in the lease that they wouldn't be smoking, and like yeah, you just avoid a lot of headache. Like I had tenants moving out in the middle of their lease. You just get, if you're not screening, like you just get less responsible people most likely living in the
yeah.
house, and yeah, more issues will come.
Yeah,
So
it's honestly probably one of the biggest mistakes people make, and one of the simplest things they can do to really protect themselves
yeah,
is to just screen. Like it's better to have it vacant for a month or two than to put the wrong tenant in, which I didn't used to believe that. I used to be so like nervous, like, oh, I can't like not have rent for a month or two. Like that's going to cost me thousands of dollars. Like I got to get someone in. But if it's empty, at least it's not getting destroyed, right? If it's empty, at least you don't have to evict anybody. Like if it's empty, that's a lot better than having the wrong person in there smoking, destroying things, not leaving when they're supposed to. Like anyway, I agree. I've been burned many times, so I like that advice. If any listeners, it's like screen your tenants, It's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and I like what you said about yeah, like just being professional. I feel like having like a professional PDF for people to fill out, a professional background credit check, and I have always like listed my properties too when I was managing them on Facebook Marketplace. That's where I got like the best, quickest people to rent. But then when they do sign the lease and everything, I really like the website avail.co.
Yeah,
I don't
Vail.
know if you've heard of that. It's
Mm-hmm.
cool. Yeah, because sometimes people want to pay online or set up automatic payments, and like it's literally free for people to set that up. So I like to have like as many options for tenants to make it the best experience for them living in the
Yeah, I've
property.
heard Avail's a good one. I've never personally used it, but I've heard that one's good. Some people use Buildium. That's for a little more scaled ones.
Uh-huh.
There's a couple others. Like say, I use Rent Ready now, and it,
Uh-huh.
it has all that as
It
well.
does
But
that
lots of
too.
options out there that people should check out. Um, Dude, that's super cool. So we're about running out of time. I want to get into like some of our final four questions, but before we do
Yeah,
that, I did want to ask you speak on the power of personal development a little bit because you've invested quite a bit of money on personal development that you could have put into real estate, that you could have put into lifestyle, that you could have just kept in savings, regardless of how hard you're working, how much money you're making, that's still a lot of money to put into personal development. Why did you decide to do that? What's been the outcome for you? Like, do you feel like it's been worth it? And then also, like, how did you spend it? Like, what type of things were you putting that money into when you say personal development?
great question. And I've kind of learned this a lot, like more recently. So I heard this quote that said like the best investment in the world is real estate, but the best real estate is in between your ears.
Mm,
And so I think like the biggest asset you really have in your life is you, right? And the more you can level up, the more skills you learn, the more value you're going to be able to provide the marketplace and the more dollars that are going to come to you. And the more dollars you make, like Dave Ramsey says this. He says your number one wealth building tool is your income. Like the more money you can make from your job, from your income, from your business, the more money you will have to invest in real estate and other things. And
yeah.
so that's like what really sparked it. And I was talking to my friend, I took my friend Jimmy Rex to lunch, and he said like, because he was like really good at networking. And I'm like, how do you network with such high caliber people? And he says, Gage, at first, you have to pay to be in the room.
Mm,
You have to pay to be in the room because you have to show them you're serious, one, but also like the most high caliber people on the planet, like not in a bad way, but they don't need you, right? And so like
right.
if they're trying to like make their message more heard, they're trying to help more people. So yeah, they're selling something to get in the room with them to teach the people that are the most serious of how to do what they're doing better, right? And so basically he said you have to pay for proximity. Like you have to pay to show people that you're serious, to learn more and to level up faster. Cuz like when people think of personal development, they think self-help books, which I think the best bang for your buck in investing in yourself are books. Like I really do.
Yeah,
I
most
think,
bang for your buck, right? You spend $5, $10, $15 on Audible, and it's like you've got
yeah,
a wealth of knowledge for a couple bucks.
and it's crazy. Like the statistic is one, like most people after they graduate high school read less than a book a year. Like in America,
Crazy.
like most people can read, but they don't read. And it's like books are the coolest thing because someone can spend 40 years of their life or 50 or 80 and learn a specialized knowledge in one area, let's say real estate investing, and then write a book that you can read or listen to in 8 hours and learn 80 years of experience in
Yeah.
8 hours. Like,
And one thing I love about books, because we live in such a world of content, right? There's so
yeah,
much content. You've got a podcast. I've got a podcast. Like everybody's got a podcast. There's just the influencer posts, the
yes,
scrolling. Like there's so much information out there. And I like podcasts. I like conversations. I like stuff. But like this conversation you and I are having, I think there's value in it. Hopefully it'll help some people. But we didn't like spend 5 years preparing this information. We're just sharing our experience for a quick hour. When you read
right.
a book, somebody's probably spent years, at least, 10, 12, 18 months thinking about what's the best content I could put in here. What's the best way I could present it? Like they've really put a lot of prep
Yeah,
into presenting that, at least for most books. Some books are trash, but
for
for most
sure.
of them, they put a lot into it. Not to mention, like you mentioned, the 40 years of experience leading
Yeah,
up to the years of preparation for that specific book. So it's like in a world where your attention is your value, that's the most valuable thing you have is where you place your attention. You gotta curate what you listen to and what you spend your time, learning. And books, I think, are underrated. I think they're more powerful than uh just another podcast or another thing. Those are good as well, but they're just different. Uh,
yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
I'm just a big fan of good, curated, well thought out, planned books that, like you said, people put so much into.
yeah. And I agree with you 100%. Like, what you tune into is who you turn into. And
Mm.
like the books you read, like the basic premise of proximity is power is you become the average of the 5 people you spend your time with, whether that's virtual people or people in person. Like there's a way to get proximity with Warren Buffett through watching YouTube videos of interviews, or you can read his book, or you can go to a seminar where he's teaching or talking, right? Or you can join his mastermind if he has one, or his like buy his course. And so like there's so many different things, but like I think the best investment you can make is in yourself, and it's to get proximity, whether in person or virtually, with people that are doing things at a higher level, people that you would want to trade places with. Because like you were saying earlier, like there's 50 million gurus out there to go learn from.
Right.
Without but like who you pick to learn from matters a lot. And I think that like so many people take advice from people they wouldn't want to trade places with in that area. Like you need to only take advice from people who've done it, who you would trade places with in that area. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, we're like of the 100K this last year that I've invested in myself, 85K of it went to Tony Robbins.
Mm.
Because why Tony Robbins out of all the people in the world is because, dude, the guy has results. He's trained Steph Curry, Conor McGregor, presidents of the United States, like for decades, not just like years, and he's gotten real results. 7 of the last 8 US presidents have asked him for advice and mentorship. Like, I don't know. There's nobody else, in my opinion, living on the planet that's more qualified than him. Because here's what I like about Tony. You can have mentors in every area of your life. You can have health mentors, you can have relationship mentors, spiritual
Right.
mentors, business mentors. But what I love about Tony is I look up to him like in every area of life. Like his whole life philosophy has been to learn from people doing the best in each field of life. He figures out how they do it at the highest level, copies it, and then teaches you in a 5-day seminar how to do it. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, dude. That's my that's my pitch for Tony right there.
I love it, man. And I think that's super powerful. And like I say, each way to expose yourself to this stuff is valuable in its own way. A book will do one thing, but it won't do the same as a podcast. A podcast
Yeah.
is one thing, it won't do the same as the seminar, and the seminar will do one thing, but it's not the same as the retreat, and it's not the same as the mastermind. Like, and if
Yeah.
you can expose yourself to all of it, like do what you can where you're at,
Yes.
but try to get in to all of it and get in those rooms. So if people want to follow you, Gage, if they're like, dude, this kid is where I'm at, I bet there's people listening. They're like, I'm not ready to drop 85,000 on Tony Robbins, but like,
Yeah.
and he's kind of too out of my realm, or this guy's too old, or this, but like maybe a young kid hearing you is like, wait, you're 26? Like, that feels so much more approachable. I want to follow you. I want to learn what you're doing. You have your
Yeah.
podcast. How can people tap into that and follow you and be in your world?
Yeah. No, I agree with you too. Like, start where you are with what you like. Do the best you can where you are with what you have, right?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, maybe it is just a book or a podcast at first, but like, slowly grow outside of your comfort zone. Because like Tony says, the best way you learn is full immersion, and that's why he does like the 4 or 5 7-day retreats. But yeah, so
Yeah. Awesome. I love that.
my yeah, I'm most active probably on Instagram, at Gage Heward, GageHeward. So I'm on there mostly, but TikTok, same username, and YouTube, same username. And then yeah, my podcast is called Proximity is Power. I actually just had Brandon Turner shout out on my
Nice.
podcast, which was sick. He's a dog in the real estate space, so that was fun interviewing him.
That's awesome, man. Well, that's great. I'm going to bust into our final 4 questions. We appreciate your time, man. You're doing some awesome stuff. It's inspiring to see you doing it so young. It's really, really cool. You got a good head on your shoulders. All right. So question number 1, if you could send a text message out to everybody in the world, they're going to get their phone blowing up and it's from Gage. What does he have to say to me? What's going to be on that text message?
That is a great question, man. I would say, this is like the first thing that comes to mind. I would say you will be the same person you are today as you are 5 years from now, besides the books you read and the people you meet. Be intentional with who you spend your time with, because it's either power or poison.
I love that, man. I love that. All right. Book or podcast recommendation besides anything, we're associated with, that you would recommend for the listeners to check out?
I really like the book called The One Thing.
That's a
It's
good
really
one.
good.
Classic. The One Thing. All right. Most expensive or interesting mistake you've made in real estate investing?
Mistake. Yeah, I would say I bought this single family house that was kind of a monster house. It was a single family house, but it had 5 units in there. And
just a Frankenstein house. Yeah.
yeah, and we were renting it as a 5-plex, and the HOA was cool with it, but then the city cracked down, and that was an expensive mistake. So, yeah,
How did you unravel that?
we're still doing it. It's
Like, I'll let you know once we figure it out.
I'm in the middle of it right now. So,
Fair enough.
yeah. I mean, like, some cities are way, way chill with that stuff, but like, just make sure you know what risk you're getting into when doing that.
Yeah, it's like if you're gonna try to like do something kind of on the side, whether it's from the HOA or the city, where it's one thing to like do it, it's another thing to not know what your game plan is if it doesn't work out. So it's like someone might be trying to short-term rental, but if the city cracks down on it because they don't have a permit or whatever, it's like, do you have a backup plan? If policies change, maybe you're not even doing anything illegal, but what if policies change and now it is not legal? It's like you should have a backup plan, or else you can kind of be in a tight spot. So I look forward to next time when you come on next year to hear how that one turned out.
Yeah, it's been fun.
All right. What's one word or a short phrase to encapsulate why you love real estate so much?
If you want to be a millionaire, invest in real estate. Like, there's not a better place more proven than real estate to build wealth in America. So
I love it, man. That's great. Well, stoked to have you on here. Stoked to follow your journey. This is my first exposure. A lot of the people we have on I've known a little bit, but I'm super impressed with what you're doing and just your approach to things. It's honestly pretty inspiring. So stoked to have you on here, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Joe, thanks so much again. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate you.
Yep. This is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you you're never too young to get started.